Welcome to SVGTV's news for Monday, July the 13th, 2020. I am Bav Norther with the details. SVG on Sunday, July the 12th, 2020 recorded 6 new cases of COVID-19 following the receipt of PCR results from the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA. The results were reported following a two-step verification process, which includes both the CARPHA Public Health Lab and the local molecular laboratory unit. A release from the National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, said the new positive cases are returning nationals who arrived on Saturday, July the 11th on American Airlines Flight 945 at the Argyle International Airport with 155 passengers. The release said the new positive cases will undergo a 14-day isolation period and that 69 other passengers who were in close contact on board the flight with the new positive cases were required to quarantine for 14 days. The other 149 passengers who arrived on the flight had negative results, either having brought these results with them or receiving negative results for COVID-19 PCR tests done on arrival in SVG. The release, however, noted that some passengers, regardless of PCR tests, have been assessed as being high risk for COVID-19 and will continue in mandatory quarantine for a period of 14 days. A second COVID-19 PCR test may be conducted on all contacts and other high-risk passengers during the 5 to 7-day period following arrival. The Health Services Subcommittee of the National Emergency Management Committee continues to urge all Vincentians to remain vigilant, comply with quarantine and isolation orders, and all of the recommendations issued relative to COVID-19, including those for conduct of mass gatherings. The public is also reminded that persons are placed in quarantine for stipulated periods because of their ongoing risk of being COVID-19 positive, despite having a previous negative COVID-19 result. And Minister of Health, Wellness and the Environment Luke Brown said new COVID-19 cases were expected as international flights resume to SVG. He commended the relevant authorities, including those of his ministry, for what he said was their efficiency in processing the 155 passengers who arrived on the American Airlines flight on Saturday at the Argyle International Airport, the first international flight since March.
The persons who were able to land down here were full of emotion, and I believe that the persons who are involved in the process of managing the flight deserve to be commended. It took a full team effort. There were the frontline workers who were at the airport and who were swabbing people at the airport and who were making sure that the swabs were packaged and sent on to the laboratory. We had the lab staff working overtime and working through the night to make sure that they could deliver the results in a timely fashion and meet our 24-hour stipulation. And they excelled at that as well. And we had the team, which is basically based at the operations center, which was on top of things, and everyone from captain to cook.
Minister Brown said the 6 new cases are mild and hence there is no need for them to be placed at the government-operated isolation center in Argyle. He also noted that while PCR testing are done in-country, a further verification still has to be done at the Caribbean Public Health Agency.
We did tests here, and we also, as an additional step, carried out some tests through the CARPHA lab in Trinidad and Tobago, and at the end of the day, when all the results were reconciled, we had a total of 6 positive cases coming in from the flight. An additional sort of a verification step, just to corroborate our results, especially in the early period, to make sure that there's comparability and reliability for the results, which is a usual thing when we are embarking on a new journey of testing.
The health minister said the 24 hours quarantine is necessary for all incoming passengers awaiting PCR test results, and that it is important for persons to comply with the protocols.
We are looking at 24 hours quarantine for persons who arrive, and that's just basically to facilitate the return of results on their tests. You may know that what we require is for someone to either bring in test results not more than 3 days old, or to be tested when they are here. So the 24 hours quarantine would be for persons who did not bring in those results and who had to be tested here, and it would allow for the turnaround time as far as the delivery of results. No persons in public quarantine at the moment, as far as I'm advised. We are by and large dealing with mild cases.
On radio on Sunday, Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves said some of the persons who arrived on the American Airlines flight on Saturday breached quarantine. He said such actions could force the government to implement more stringent measures.
The authorities don't want to take you before the court for you to be dealt with by the court if you break in the quarantine. You're disobeying the chief medical officer of health, or the chief medical officer. You have to abide by the quarantine, please. The police come for you this morning and take you up on Sunday morning to take you down to the barracks, to hold you there until tomorrow to take you to the court. How would you feel? In fact, they hear it, they will listen to Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, but they don't want to listen to the authorities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is true that most persons are following the regulations, but you have a few persons who are creating a problem. If you do that, you're going to put the country in a position where they are going to have to take even more stringent measures.
Meanwhile, the health minister is encouraging all Vincentians to remain vigilant, noting that the safety measures or protocols in place, and they are to guide persons who, by all means, should comply with them.
We are always encouraging persons to be vigilant. Clearly, this is a development that we have to take into account as we organize our daily lives. The ministry has been very careful to make sure that persons are reminded about all the relevant precautions. We recognize even before the fact of the arrival of the flight that there will be the possibility of additional cases being discovered. It's just for us to make sure that we could contain any potential spread. We have ensure that in terms of our medical capacity, and we are just continuing to strengthen our public relations. We recognize that there is a great good which is served by ensuring that Vincentians who are stranded overseas and other categories of persons are able to come home.
Minister Brown said that a report on the American Airlines flight on Saturday will be deliberate upon to see what can be improved in terms of the protocols as they are preparing for some international flights at the AIA.
Them are still in force. Now that we have the particular experience of actually having to manage a flight, an incoming flight, I think there will be a review of the process and the procedures, and we will perhaps see what comes out of that review. We clearly, if somebody is a positive case, if we identify a positive case from the flight, then that individual will be kept in isolation, and if we have no such positive cases, then persons would be released from quarantine.
The RSVG police force is again urging every citizen to be responsible individuals by adhering to all of the recommended protocols to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus. The lifting of the ban on the playing of amplified music and the supplementary protocols for the managed conduct of mass gatherings with or without amplified music were implemented from Friday, July 10th, 2020 to July 31st, 2020 in the first phase. In a news release today, the RSVG Police Force Public Relations Department said they have received information that some operators or owners of places of entertainment, including bars, nightclubs and others, have failed to insist on their patrons to comply fully with the recommended protocols, especially with respect to contact tracing and wearing of face covering. Noting the importance of contact tracing to the fight of the spread of COVID-19 virus, the force is encouraging all event organizers to record the names and contact numbers of each persons entering the event. The information is said must be securely stored by the organizer for a period of 28 days to aid the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Environment to trace persons who would have attended the event if necessary. Face covering, the RSVG Police Force says, is also a must at these events. Financial assistance could be extended to include other categories of workers or entities here impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So says Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves during the Views and Issues program on WFM Sunday. PM Gonsalves said that the 3 months assistance is almost up for some persons, and based on the COVID-19 situation globally, things have not changed much. He said they will first have to look at these receiving unemployment benefits.
The unemployment benefit for all sets of workers through the NIS system, and those which we finance outside of the NIS system. We had said 3 months. Some of them we had said 3 months, and it look as though the 3 months would be coming to an end. It look as though we'll have to extend the benefits because we are not yet back to normal. But it's a challenging one. But we have to do so. I've been talking with the Minister of Finance. I was talking to Camilo and the Director General of Finance and Planning. I've also been talking to the Director of the NIS.
In addition to the unemployment benefits, the Prime Minister says he is concerned for the more than 1,000 Vincentian sailors who return home and are not gainfully employed. He said that financial assistance is being considered for these persons.
Some hardship which is beginning to be felt by seafarers. You remember, they will send home money. But I was advised that on many of the cruise ships, during the time when they were not, while they were being fed, they were not given a salary as such. With some of the oil rig workers, so they're having some challenge, and over 1,000 of them have come home, and I have to find a way, to get some resources to help them in a similar manner, like I've been helping the unemployed people here and those who are the vendors and the like.
And the vendors plying their trade outside the Massey store in Arnesville could be relocated to a more suitable place to continue their trade. The issue was addressed by Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves on the radio yesterday morning. Last Thursday, the vendors were given notice to remove from the area within 7 days and complained of having no alternative place to ply their trade, which they say is their livelihood.
Yeah, some areas where persons go and vend. One person vends there, 2 persons, and the place is kept clean and so on. People may shrug their shoulders and say, okay, even though they're not supposed to there, it's tolerable. But when it becomes really, really problematic for a number of reasons, sanitation, health, security, then the physical planning authorities have to deal with it. I know you're talking about the vendors out of Massey. It would be very good if we can get a place where we can, somewhere in the vicinity now, where we can properly house them.
PM Gonsalves noted that one of the reasons why the vendors had to move is due to many complaints lodged against them by citizens.
The thing is this, there have been a lot of complaints by ordinary citizens about the matter. So that's that. You know, but we have to, that's that in relation to the issue that you raise. That's not that in relation to the persons, because we have to try to accommodate them in some form or fashion.
There are approximately 260 stalls that will become available to vendors when the buildings are opened up in Kingstown later this month. President of the Public Service Union, Elroy Boucher, said for meaningful pension reform in SVG, changes must be made to the current legislation. Boucher's comments came on SVG-TV's Viewpoint program as a panelist examining several issues of concern as it relates to pension reform. Boucher said one must carefully examine the provisions of the Pension Act.
Look holistically at the Pension Act itself and the regulations to see how what positive changes you can bring to that. So that's why I say the reform that we are focusing on may not be what government is actually looking at, because we want to look at the act itself. So it's structural reform. There should be an exit clause. There isn't in the current Pension Act for the public service.
You can't, but when you say there's no
exit
clause. So for example, I know for example, police after 20 years of service.
Police has it.
Yeah. It's not that way in the public service.
No, it's not.
No.
So if you leave before you reach the retirement age, you get nothing. You lose everything. Yeah. Right? So we also want. So
those are things that you should be fighting for.
But that is why.
So that is why it must be protected by law.
That's why I keep saying the reform that we're looking at cannot just be of a parametric nature. It has to be structural. You must, when you're done, you would have the new Pension Act. You should.
Another panelist on the program was President of the SVG Teachers Union, Oswald Robinson. who said increasingly the pension age is an issue for pensioners and highlighted some of the concerns of retirees.
You have pursued a career, and at some point people want to get out. Even though there might be job satisfaction, yes, but you know, as you age, you tend to slow down, you know, physically and in a number of areas, and at that particular point in time, you need to go off to enjoy a decent form of living. The government, the authorities, the state needs to take into consideration the cost of living of retired people, because when you're retired, you do not get an increase in your salary, in your pension. You still have to live with everybody else, you know, and we need to pay particular attention to that.
Robinson said there must be careful examination of how much each worker contributes to his or her own pension, which could be an issue in their retirement.
The whole issue again of the proposed calculation for pension, we need to look at that, because if you're going to ask a 5% of people's salary as the contribution, and those persons, their salaries would be at the lowest because they are the new persons coming in. You start at the minimum and you go up to the maximum. We need to look at that. A lot of the principles by the ILO, they speak to protection, social security, protection, social dialogue. Here's where the trade union is part of that dialogue. And we have to ensure that there's equity right across the board. In my opinion, every worker must be pensionable.
The SVG Red Cross Society continues to collaborate with the National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, in providing relief in the event of a national disaster or national emergency, which includes psychosocial support. Psychosocial support helps individuals and communities to heal the psychological wounds and rebuild social structures after an emergency or a critical event. It also helps to change people into active survivors rather than passive victims. Speaking on NBC Radio today, Health Officer on the Red Cross Management Committee, Harvey Farrell, said that the organization has been preparing and training volunteers from communities island-wide so that they will be able to offer professional counseling and psychological support for persons in shelters and others in the case of a natural disaster.
The volunteer does when he or she is giving psychosocial support is really lending a listening ear to the person. You know, sometimes, Colville, people don't want us to just tell them things. If they have gone through a trauma, they have a story, and they may just want somebody to be there, if even it is to listen. So the person who's rendering psychosocial support will be there to lend that listening ear, while at the same time you take from them what are the physical things that have impacted you. Okay, so if it was loss, let us say you're a farmer, you have lost your crop. How can we help you in this case to bounce back from the loss of your crop? Because loss of crop means also loss of income. So when the Red Cross intervenes here, our thing is to try to help you to bounce back and be more resilient after the disaster.
Another program the Red Cross has in place for this hurricane season is its water and sanitation service, where they provide mobile water purification device which can be used to purify water in the case of a water disruption.
The things that get disrupted very easily is our water supply system. Now, if you have a case where the water system, where the water supply is so disrupted that it becomes unsafe in some areas, we provide what we call a Watson service. This is really it's a simple mobile water purification device that can go, if there is a stream running nearby, we can harvest water from that stream, pass it through the Watson kit, and you have good potable water for household use coming out on the other side. The Watson kit is really operated by a number of volunteers who incidentally are attached to the CWSA.
Oh. The Red Cross also helps in community response in helping removing damaged trees from roads, clean flooded schools and other work in communities during and after hurricanes. FARL encourages Vincentians to be safe and prepared in this year's hurricane season. And customers of the St. Vincent Electricity Services Limited VINLEC will see a significant decrease in the fuel surcharge rate applicable on bills for July 2020. In a news release today, the company said this month's rate is 21.12 cents per unit, the lowest in the past 4 years. A rate of 21.01 cents per unit was applicable on bills issued in March 2016. According to the electricity company, the July 2020 fuel surcharge rate represents a decrease of 21.86% over the June rate, which stood at 27.03 cents per unit. It said similar fuel surcharge rates in the range of 20 cents per unit prior to the 2016 was during the year 2009, noting that the fuel surcharge rate covers the cost of the fuel required to produce unit of electricity. A young woman originally from Sandy Bay has been reported missing in Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service on Sunday issued a missing persons alert on Sunday for 24-year-old Grace Esther Roberts. The report says that the West End Police are actively searching for Roberts, whose address was given as LP number 78 Andrew Trace, Blue Basin Road, Diego Martin. Roberts, who migrated to Trinidad a few years ago, was reported last seen on Thursday, July the 2nd, 2020, and was reported missing on Saturday, July the 11th, 2020. And the RSVG Police Force is issuing a warning to the owners of stray animals through the length and breadth of SVG to have them tied. The police said these animals, mainly cattle and sheep, are usually left untied mostly in the areas of Bocamet, Pembroke, Diamond on the Stadium Tract, and Cane Garden, and can be seen wandering through the streets, freely hindering the free flow of traffic and a nuisance to the general public on a whole, destroying their vegetation, root crops, and in some cases damaging people's property. The police said this situation, if not remedied, creates the potential for accidents and conflict that, according to Section 3 and Section 4 of the Stock Trespass Act, Chapter 54 of the revised edition of the laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the owner of any land may seize and impound any animal found trespassing thereon, and the owner of any land may claim compensation for the owner of the impounded animals. Further, Section 21(1)(4) of the said Act authorizes the owner of any lands, his servant, or persons acting with the owner's authority to destroy with undue suffering any impounded animal found trespassing on his land that cause injury to the other animals or plants. Notify the owner of the animal that it was destroyed, or destroy the carcass within 4 hours. If the carcass is not removed from within 4 hours, bury it or cause it to be otherwise disposed of in a sanitary manner. Section 21(4) exonerates the owner of the land, his servant, or any persons acting on the owner's authority from damages to the owner of the animal for any injury or damage done to the animal while trespassing on his land. Against this backdrop, the police are advising owners of stray animals to have the situation rectified by desisting from leaving these animals untied. Actions, they say, will be taken within the confines of the law if these animals are not tied by an allocated time frame.